Hey everybody, welcome to virtual Q&As at SF Indie Fest. As you might have read, we're celebrating 25 years of bringing some of the more interesting independent films from around the world here to San Francisco. Um, it's just kind of like it's crazy to think it's been that long. But this is a really special film we're about that you've just seen, Second Person, and we're lucky enough to have the director here, Stephen Emerson. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Chris.
Um, you know, uh, this was just kind of a real delight to kind of run into a couple of filmmaker friends in the Bay Area and said, "Hey, you guys see this new film that's kind of finishing up?" And it was just so cool. But of course, there's kind of in addition to just being a great film, it seems like there's an interesting backstory here. Do you kind of want to give us a little bit of setup of like what was the kind of original inspiration for the film and what was the kind of journey to get it here today?
Yeah, it was a long journey. Um, I was living in New York. I'm a musician and songwriter, and I spent 5 years there performing. And um, at some point, I did towards the end of my 5 years there, did a music video that was shot. This guy had this newfangled technology called a Hi8 camera, um, and I was really impressed how much it looked like film. Especially it was had able to capture this sort of saturated black and white look, and it got me intrigued. Like I always thought I might want to make a film. Like if I was a musician, I'd be a filmmaker. But just the so expensive, film stock, and so I started thinking about that, and then when I was ready to leave New York, I really felt like I wanted to capture something about that experience that, like, have a memento or something to keep with me. So yeah, I just kind of I bought a camera and I just dove into it. I had some people in mind who were intriguing characters, and just New York itself was such a character. It has so much character, um, and I just thought I could put something together that would sort of capture the story of not specifically my story being there, but just capture the essence of what I loved about New York.
Yeah, and so that was back in the early '90s, is that right?
Yeah, 93.
And yeah, it's interesting because the thing that's great about your film is it's kind of like it's both timeless, but then also a time capsule of a certain time in New
Yeah.
York in some ways. Um, how did you kind of find that experience of like shooting the film, and then did you try editing it originally, or what made you kind of put it away and then kind of revisit it here during the pandemic?
Yeah, I did try editing it. I had with the Hi8 camera and a Super VHS deck, uh, very linear editing. And I'd never shot a film. I didn't know I didn't know what I was doing, which probably worked to my advantage at some point. I mean, for part of it. But when I started editing, yeah, would have to, put the tape in and find the spot and then hit pause and hit play. So I put a pretty rough cut together, but it was very clunky, and I thought maybe someday the technology will improve, and this will be easier. So I did put it away, and I always thought I'd come back to it. And then I started doing started doing some film scoring and working more with filmmakers and editors, and found some people I wanted to work with. And yeah, I dug up the files, and uh, we finished it 26, 7 years later.
And in revisiting it, how do you think the kind of original idea for the film that you had evolved? Were there kind of because of just editing technology or just even going through life? How do you think the kind of do you think the film changed at all? The film that you made here today versus the film that you would have made, if you'd finished editing it right
Yeah, I think it's pretty close. It's just much more focused. And you mentioned it being timeless. That was very intentional in in the filming of it. I was that's an aesthetic that I like a lot. That you know, it's timelessness. Even like as a songwriter, I had friends at the time where there would be a line in a song about the lights blinking on the answering machine, or just something like that. Just sort of would put you mention something that would kind of anchor it in a certain time period. So I tried to avoid anything like that in making the film, which I'm glad I did. And so when we went back to it, yeah, it's still. Uh, It just yeah, it's just got a lot more focus. But basically the same story. But you're able to redo the music and the mix and get the color and the editing a lot clearer. The titles, everything. I'm very pleased with how it all finally came together.
Yeah, and so you've continued your kind of career as a musician here over the last um, couple decades. Like, how do you think what do you think the kind of when you're digging into a creative project as a musician versus a filmmaker, where do you think things kind of overlap, and where do you think kind of like we can kind of see your perspective as a musician, or just you know like how do kind of both experiences inform each other?
Yeah, I think that there's an aesthetic that I just have as a creator that comes out in whether it's music or making a film, and uh, and that's just leaving space, having things. There's kind of a minimalist approach.
Hmm.
I think of an album of like Miles Davis, kind of Blue, and how that was a sort of a revelation, and how we talked about the space between the notes are just as important as the notes. And so I feel like, yeah, the silences and in whether it be in music or in the film, it allows the audience almost to collaborate in a way. If somebody's
Hmm.
not saying it's something, but there's an opportunity to think about what's being said or what might be said. So yeah, that's an aesthetic that I have that informs whatever I do.
I like that idea. I'm gonna have to give that one a little bit of additional thought, or I might borrow that out at some point in time.
Sure.
That is a cool way to kind of see things. Um, how you know in when you were making this film, what was collaboration like with the actors and things? Kind of coming from them, obviously as musicians collaborate too, but like, what was it like, kind of directing the actors back then? And that also kind of leads up to the next question is like, have the talent in the film seen it now, or did they see it cut then, or have they seen the finished film now?
Not the finished one, no. Yeah, so the process was very improvised, but around a structure. So I knew the sort of the structure of the story, but I didn't write dialogue. I had certain things, certain points that I wanted someone in one of the scenes to say or mention, but the characters. One is the main character Lola. She's I was working at the Alvin Ailey Dance Center in New York, and she was a student there, and I just found her very appealing. She was funny, and there was this she's English is her second language, and so there's sort of built-in comedy of misunderstanding, and in the film there's several times when she completely misunderstands what her friend says, and it's just that's sort of that's what I was hoping for, and luckily I got it. So I would set up the scene and sort of set up a little backstory, and then that was the other thing about video was I could just let the camera run for half an hour and
Right.
improvise. I was the cameraman. I was the lighting guy. I didn't know what I was doing. I put this camera on a tripod. I knew I should get good sound, so I rented a good shotgun mic from one of the places, big movie rental houses there in New York. But yeah, that was just was I was winging it for sure.
Well, and also I'll do a little bit of a caveat for the audience. So one is so one of the things, we watch a lot of films that come through, and lots of filmmakers with good intentions or even good films, but like one of the things often filmmakers forget is like good sound. So
Yeah.
it's like, just having that from the front, allows you to kind of immerse yourself. But then also, I can imagine how so now we're all used to this kind of digital nonlinear editing, right? But like back then you're talking about, it's like you're having to do this tape to tape, and so I can imagine when you have like hours and hours of tape with just like it just kind of running, it's it can be kind of a bit of a sophisticated task in some way.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so excuse me. you know, with the film, how, were there kind of certain filmmakers that you were kind of influenced by at that time, and then how have you kind of seen like kind of what you captured back then kind of like continue to develop? And I'm just kind of think about like, back in the, you talk about like high eight, being this kind of like new
Yeah.
technology inspiring you. And I remember back in the early 2000s, like DV technology was the thing that kind of inspired people to kind of pick up a camera,
Yeah.
and there was this whole kind of line genre of filmmaking, kind of out of New York, mumblecore, at the time. And so it's just interesting of like how each generation's kind of passed along
Yeah.
the baton. But yeah, who were some of your kind of filmmaking influences back in the early 90s? Um,
Well, yeah. Yeah. Back when we would go to the video store.
right.
um, the new wave, filmmakers, Godard was a favorite, and then, of course, Jarmusch's first couple films, um, and yeah, yeah, those are kind of it. I mean, I'm not deep into cinema as a, you know, I love it, but I'm no expert, and but really, it's yeah, the aesthetics that draw me into something, and I've tried to make a film since when I moved to the Bay Area, um, and I just couldn't get a real beat on something that felt like that had that, I don't know, I'll just call it vibe. That's kind of vague, but you know,
Yeah.
talk about vibe a lot in music. But that's a, of course you have to have story and good everything, actors and characters, but it's sort of the aesthetic, that vibe of it, that that draws me in. So yeah, if films that yeah, that's kind of vague to capture that, but you know what I mean? Yeah,
No, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, in the end, obviously, like, one is, yeah, I mean, like you're saying, stories and characters are important, but the vibe that I think you reference is something that like filmmakers or musicians like you respond to, right? Like there's
yeah,
something you're reacting, as a catalyst. But also, I mean, obviously filmmaking is a visual medium, and so aesthetic, is a big part of the kind of like storytelling tool. Uh,
yeah. I just saw the film EO. I don't know if you know that one.
I don't know if I've seen that one yet.
Um, I'm gonna butcher his name. Smolomowski, the Polish guy.
Okay.
Um, anyway, it's about a donkey. Um,
Oh, right. Yes, I have
yeah,
read about that. That's supposed to be one of
yeah,
the best films of last year.
yeah. So we just saw it, and he was there and talked about it. And it was just like it was a very rich visual experience. And even when you didn't even always know what was happening. It was immersive, and it was beautifully shot, and it's sort of like a poem. You don't have to understand a poem to be moved by it, you know.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, you're conveying some emotion, and whether you can articulate it verbally or not, you're able to put something across.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, there's two questions I have for you. One is, do you think you'll make another film again?
I sure hope so. Yeah. Uh,
Well, I would definitely look forward to seeing what you put together. I really appreciated seeing second person. And I know many people probably have seen the film and want to can follow your creative efforts. Is there like a website for your music or a good place to follow you on like Instagram or Facebook or?
Yeah, my website needs to be dusted off a bit, but there's stuff there. StephenEmerson.com, and yeah, that's the best way.
Okay, awesome.
Track me
Well,
down.
everybody, glad you got a chance to check out this special film. And Stephen will be there in person for the Roxy screening. We'll look forward to kind of sharing in the Dark Theater and just
Mm,
really,
yeah.
thanks for wrapping the film up and sharing it here with the Bay Area.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to see it in the theater.